Opium is a scandalous fragrance that provokes and mesmerizes. It's a scent of decadence, opulence, and hedonism, evoking Yves Saint Laurent's vision of the Orient, which he masterfully transformed into a fragrance that became a great commercial success. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name's Luke and here on this channel I talk about fragrances. Thank you for clicking on this video. This will be an in-depth review of one of my favorite classic Oriental fragrances, none other than Opium by Yves Saint Laurent. In this video I'll be reviewing the 2009 EDP formulation of Opium. I'll start with the history of this fragrance, which you can skip if you're only here for the review. The timestamps will be in the description box down below. Opium was launched alongside YSL's Autumn-Winter collection of 1977. It was heavily inspired by the Orient, particularly China. At the time, magazines described it as an unusual blend of patchouli, myrrh, and vanilla. The entire creative process, from the scent to the shape of the bottle and the press release, was overseen and designed by Saint Laurent himself. He also designed the bottle for the Pure perfume, which comes in a deep red lacquered bottle with a window through which you can see the liquid, complete with a tassel. The bottle resembles an antique Chinese opium flask. In fact, the YSL website calls the modern bottle, the one I have, they call it a chic, chinoiserie-inspired flacon, and I think they did a great job of keeping the bottle modern while remaining true to the original design. This is a luxury item, a luxury product, and I'm pleased that it doesn't come in some generic-looking bottle. The fashion designer was inspired by everything Oriental, which was a trend throughout the 20th century. And Opium was by no means the first Oriental fragrance. In 1913, a company called Parfums de Rosine launched a fragrance called Nuit de Chine in a jade-coloured bottle that looked like a Chinese tobacco container. But Saint Laurent took it a step further. He embraced Oriental influences and added an element of shock, of scandal, by naming the fragrance Opium. This choice did cause a scandal, especially in the United States. Orientalism in fragrance and art always raises questions about cultural appropriation. I'm sure some people believe it's inappropriate to name a perfume opium because that reinforces the stereotype that the Chinese were an opium-addicted nation, a belief held by many Westerns at the time, by the way. However, I don't really see that. I don't share that opinion. I don't have a problem with calling perfumes Oriental because Oriental refers to artistic inspiration and art has always borrowed from other cultures. Inspiration is what makes art, well, art. The art of perfumery is no different. You have to be inspired by something to create something new. Saint Laurent was influenced by the idea of the Orient, a term that is quite vague and doesn't really signify much, but it's traditionally associated, when talking about fragrances of course, it's associated with heavier, spicier, ambery, incensey and resinous fragrances. Chaillan from Chaillan was the quintessential Oriental fragrance inspired by an Indian love story. Then we had Taboo by Dinard, as well as Yves from Estée Lauder in the 1950s, which also influenced Opium in a way. While Yves has this Coca-Cola record, Opium is centered around myrrh, opopanax and patchouli, and I must say I prefer Opium to Yves, but I'll discuss the notes in the second part of this video. Now I'm talking about Orientalism, so let me share what Saint Laurent himself said about creating Opium. After the fragrance Y, I wanted a lush, heavy and languid perfume. I wanted Opium to be captivating and I wanted its scent to evoke everything I like, the sophisticated Orient, Imperial China and exoticism. He was inspired by the artistic side of the Orient, by the grandeur of Imperial China and its elaborate architecture. Yet in the 1970s, that was already considered ancient history, not contemporary reality. China in the 70s was a modern communist country. The exoticism Saint Laurent spoke of was merely a legend, or perhaps an artistic vision. So what I'm trying to say is that Oriental, the word Oriental, in this case, has to do with artistic inspiration. You can't really appropriate a culture that no longer exists. When we talk about the history of this fragrance, Yves Saint Laurent's personal life is also worth mentioning because he led a very hedonistic life, and despite his popularity and his success, he faced many challenges. He struggled with addiction and mental health issues that affected his career. He lived a decadent life and was somewhat of an outcast, if you will, which has led him to seek solace in drugs, alcohol, and erotic relationships. He definitely had a dark side, but we must consider this within the appropriate historical context. The 1970s marked the beginning of the disco era, mainly in the United States, but also in Europe. In 1977, the same year OPIUM was launched, Studio 54, the infamous nightclub in New York, opened its doors. I don't have to explicitly tell you what went on in that nightclub, but it is said that opium permeated the air of the nightclub and many others across the globe. As the online blog Ça Fleur Bon writes, the after party for the launch of OPIUM took place at Studio 54 in New York. At Studio 54 in 1978, the sumptuous fruit and spice-soaked smell of Yves Saint Laurent OPIUM floats through the air like velvet smoke. Vogue writes about it too. They say that OPIUM was the fragrance that defined Studio 54. The celebration began with a gathering at South Street Seaport on a tall ship decorated to the nines, continued with a viewing of the fireworks over the East River, and ended with a late-night party at, where else but Studio 54. And this lavish launch and launch party is said to have been one of the most, if not the most extravagant, fragrance-related event of all time. It doesn't get more iconic than that. So it's important to see this perfume not just as a great classic, but also as a symbol of the disco era, and perhaps a symbol of Saint Laurent's own hedonistic lifestyle. OPIUM reflects the spirit of the time. The 1970s was a very sexually liberated decade, and Saint Laurent was indeed an individual who challenged traditional codes of behavior. He led a lavish life, which can absolutely lead to self-destruction in the end. And opium as a fragrance is a symbol of that. It's a symbol of decadence, opulence, and hedonism. To name a perfume after a drug was unthinkable back then, but he did it. He teased the public with the new release, and because of the times he lived in, it turned out to be an incredibly wise marketing decision. Indeed, the fragrance was an astonishing success. Stores were unable to keep it on the shelves. In 1 year alone, sales in Europe reached $30 million, and opium is still popular to this day. It's up there with Chanel No. 5. Opium is an exquisite Oriental fragrance. Even in its current formulation, it envelops you and it announces its presence when you enter the room. But let's start with the notes. According to the YSL website, the notes for the EDP are as follows. Top notes: bergamot, mandarin, aldehydes. Heart notes or middle notes: jasmine, spicy carnation accord and rose. And base notes: orchid vanilla accord, myrrh absolute, and patchouli essence. The American website lists both opoponax and myrrh, and so does Fragrantica. However, the notes on Fragrantica are incomplete, in my opinion, because there's not a single spicy note listed, and Opium EDP is very much a spicy fragrance. The EDT is even spicier because of the carnation, but this one is spicy as well. However, the myrrh is the star of the show in this fragrance. When you spray it on, you get a hint of mandarin and a hint of something aldehydic, but it quickly becomes an amber-dominant fragrance, an Oriental fragrance. I get a lot of opoponax and myrrh, the difference being that opoponax is another name for scented sweet myrrh, which has an intensely sweet balsamic aroma. So opium is an Oriental spicy fragrance, but it's also very sweet from the myrrh, the opoponax and the vanilla. So don't be afraid to try it if you're someone who isn't the biggest fan of vintage smelling fragrances. This is just a beautiful, resinous, spicy, ambery fragrance. It's very thick, rich, mysterious, and completely unisex by today's standards, to be honest. So don't be afraid to try it if you're a man, if you're a woman, whoever. This is a fragrance that anyone can enjoy. I will say, though, that it's one of those fragrances that are just instantly recognizable, so people will probably know that you're wearing opium when you put it on. To me, opium smells rich, opulent, and just decadent, but also very sophisticated, very elegant, and also very grown up. This is not a fragrance for a teenager. Definitely not. It's sensuous, voluptuous, extravagant, and mesmerizing. It has a je ne sais quoi to it, a magical quality that's just impossible to describe. It's the magic of opium, and you have to try it in order to understand it. But if you're willing to let it sit on your skin, you will be rewarded, even if you don't like vintage fragrances. I'll be honest with you, the newest formula has something a bit scratchy in the opening. It's not as smooth and creamy as the original, so I find that I have to, put it on and leave it alone for about 5 minutes. And from then on, it's just perfection, and I start properly enjoying it. So having tried the original formula, I have to say that the new one, despite being beautiful in its own right, is just a bit disharmonious. Let me explain that. All the elements of opium are present. It smells like opium and it performs like opium, but it's not quite the same as the original version. It's not velvety smooth and buttery soft like the original. It lacks the depth and richness of the original pure perfume, which has been discontinued, unfortunately. They did re-release it back in 2017 as a limited edition to celebrate Opium's 40th anniversary. But if you want a bottle of the Perfume, you'll have to go on eBay and pay several hundred euros, dollars, pounds to get that. I would buy it if I saw it for a good price, but I'm perfectly happy with this 2009 reformulation, and the bottle is also beautiful. Opium to me is all about the balsamic notes, the resins, vanilla, patchouli. When it was released, Opium set a standard for how an Oriental fragrance should smell. It's a decadent scent, and I really urge everyone to try it. As far as performance goes, I have to say the performance is excellent. Opium is still a statement fragrance, very potent. It projects like crazy during the first, let's say, 3 hours, but then it becomes closer to the skin, but it still lasts about 16 hours on my skin. And when I start moving again, or when I take a shower in the evening, the scent is reactivated by the heat and it starts projecting again. So it never really stops radiating from your skin. It lasts until you wash it off with soap. So even with the new version, you only need about, I would say, 3 to 5 sprays, no more than that. Maybe 6 if you're wearing it in the dead of winter, but in the summer, I wouldn't even wear this in the summer. Maybe I would, I don't know. But I wouldn't do more than 3 sprays. Opium is a fragrance for someone really confident It makes a statement and it enters the room before you. So don't overspray it, or it will end up wearing you. So there you have it. That's my review of OPIUM, the 2009 formulation. Thank you very much for watching. Please give this video a like and leave me a comment down below. Bye.